welcome back to Her Strength in Him. I'm V, and this right here, this is the final episode of the Marriage Through Biblical Lenses series. And I just want to take a second before we get into it because I don't want to just blow right past this moment. If you've been with me from the first episode in the series all the way here, I want to thank you. Genuinely want to thank you. You walked through something with me, and I need you to know that this series did something in me too. It stretched my faith. It challenged the way that I think about covenant, and it honestly reminded me over and over and over that God's design is always better than anything we could come up with on our own. So again, thank you for being here. This one is for you. Here's a question that I want you to sit with for just a moment. What if everything that you've ever believed about love, about marriage, and commitment was only a shadow of something infinitely greater? What if the love story that you've been searching for, the one that you've prayed for, the one that you've hoped for, maybe even the one that you've given up on, was actually a picture of something eternal? That's where we're ending the series today. Not with a human couple, not with a story from ancient history that inspires us from a distance. No, today we're going to the source, the relationship that every single marriage in this series was always pointing to, and that's Jesus and his bride, the church. This is the blueprint. This is the love that defines what marriage was always created to be. So go ahead, grab your coffee, grab your tea, get settled in, and let's close out this series the way it was always meant to end, with Jesus. Before I read this passage, I need you to understand something about how Paul writes it, because if you just hear it cold, you might miss what he's actually doing. He starts talking about husbands and wives, and then mid-thought, he pivots. He says, hold on, I'm not primarily talking about marriage. I'm talking about Christ and the church. Marriage is the illustration. Christ and his bride is the point. What Paul is revealing is that marriage wasn't invented as a social institution. It was designed as a living picture of the greatest covenant relationship like ever. And that means every marriage, including yours, is carrying a message. And the question is, what is your marriage saying about the love of Christ? Sit with that for a second, and then let's read about it. So where we're going to read today is from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 33. And here's what it says. Wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. In Ephesians 5, Paul is writing about marriage, but again, he stops mid-thought and he calls it a mystery. Not confusing kind of mystery, not complicated. Mystery in the biblical sense means a truth that was hidden and has now been revealed. And what he reveals is this: marriage was never just about two people. It has always, always been a picture of Christ and the church. Think about what that means for a second. Before the first vow was ever spoken, like before the first wedding was ever celebrated, God had already designed marriage to be a living illustration of the greatest love story. In ancient Jewish culture, when a man chose a bride, he would leave his father's house and then go prepare a home for her. He would pay a price to secure her, and then he would return for her. That imagery is everywhere in how Jesus describes his relationship with his people. He told his disciples in John 14, verses 2 and 3, "I go to prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." He paid the ultimate price, his own life on the cross. He sealed the covenant in blood, and he's coming back for his bride. You see, the church isn't a building. It's not a denomination. The church is every person who has placed their faith in Jesus, redeemed, beloved, and set apart. We are his bride, and this relationship is the standard everything else is measured against. Every marriage that we've studied this series, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Joseph and Mary, every single one was a chapter in a story that was always pointing to this right here. And today, we're reading the final chapter. Now that we know the relationship, let's talk a little bit about what it teaches us. Because this isn't just a beautiful picture. No, it's a blueprint we're actually meant to build from. Let's start here because this is the foundation everything else is built on. Jesus didn't love the church because she had it all together. No, he didn't wait until she was worthy, until she was polished or impressive. He gave his life for her while she was still broken, while she was still wandering, while she was still lost. That is the actual condition we were in when he chose us, and he still said yes. That's the love that this relationship is built on. And here's why that matters for your marriage. We are called to love the same way. Not when it's easy, not when your spouse has earned it or is showing up the way that you need them to. We are called to love sacrificially and consistently. The question stops being, do I feel like loving right now? And it becomes, what am I willing to lay down for this person today? That is a completely different standard, and it comes straight from Scripture. Again, in Ephesians 5:25, it says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her." That bar is not set low. Paul doesn't say, love your wife like a good man. He says, love her like Jesus, who went to the cross for his bride, the church. That's the comparison, and that's the standard. And Romans 5:8 makes it even clearer. And it says, "But God demonstrates his own love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." He loved us at our absolute worst. Before we cleaned up, before we got it right, before we even wanted him, before we even got it together. That's not love that responds. No, that's love that initiates. Even when it costs something. And honestly, it should be especially when it costs something. Here's the second thing I want to point out. Marriage is a covenant. It's not a contract. And we really need to talk about this one because I think it's one of the most important distinctions in this entire series. Think about it. A contract is transactional. You hold up your end, and I'll hold up mine. And the moment that one person stops performing, the whole thing is up for renegotiation or even cancellation. That's how we treat a lot of things in life, right? And honestly, it makes sense in business, but It was never meant to be the foundation of a marriage. See, a covenant is different. It's not sealed by performance, it's sealed by promise. Jesus' commitment to his bride is not conditional on her behavior. It doesn't fluctuate based on how she's doing that week or anything along those lines. It's rooted in his character and sealed in his blood. That's not a contract, that's a covenant. And here's where it gets real. We live in a culture that has quietly, or maybe not so quietly, turned marriage into a contract. If it stops working for me, if I'm not happy, if I've grown in a different direction, I can always get out of it. And I'm not here to be harsh about that because marriage is genuinely hard. And everyone's situations, they're different and they're complex. Don't get me wrong. But here's what I do want to name in this. The biblical design was never meant to be a contract. The question was never supposed to be, is this still working for me? Is this still benefiting me? It was supposed to be, how do we honor what we committed to before God? And that's the harder question, but it's the right one. In Hosea chapter 2, verses 19 through 20, it says, I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in loving kindness and in compassion, and I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. Then you will know the Lord. Read that slowly. Forever. Righteousness. Loving kindness. This is God speaking to a people who had walked away from him over and over and over again. And his response is to pursue her and to commit to her again and again and again. That's the language of someone who does not let the other person's unfaithfulness define the commitment. And again, that's the blueprint that we should be following. And then in Jeremiah 31, verse 33, that adds something really important too. It says, I will put my law within them, and on their heart I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Covenant doesn't just change your behavior. It changes you from the inside. It gets written on your heart. That's exactly what a healthy marriage does. It doesn't just modify what you do. Over time, it reshapes who you are. Okay, and here's the third point that I want to make here. Christ sanctifies his bride, and marriage is a sanctifying force. This one might be the most challenging point in the whole episode, but it might also be the most freeing, depending on where you are right now. See, Jesus didn't pursue the church because she was already holy. He pursued her to make her holy. He didn't look at her and say, you know, girl, once you get it together, I'll commit. No. He looked at her in all of her brokenness, in all of her inconsistency, in all of her wandering, and he said, you are the one I'm choosing. And then his love went to work on her. If we go back to Ephesians chapter 5, 26 and 27, where it says, he cleanses her, he sanctifies her, that he might one day present her to himself without spot or wrinkle. His love doesn't leave her as he found her. And again, that's the whole point. And so here's what that means for your marriage. And I want you to really, really hear this. Your marriage is not just a relationship. It is one of the primary tools that God uses to refine you. Your spouse is going to see the parts of you that are still rough, that are still unhealed, that are still a work in progress. You know, the parts that you can hide from everyone else. And that's not a flaw in the design. That is the design. Marriage is meant to make you more like Christ, not more comfortable. Jesus is actively working on his bride. He's not passively hoping that she figures it out. He's continuously refining and restoring and renewing her. That's the kind of love marriage is called to reflect. Not love that accepts you and leaves you exactly where you are. It's a love that accepts you and then walks alongside you as you grow. And let's turn to Proverbs for a quick sec. In Proverbs 27, verse 17, It says it simply: iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. The people with the most access to us have the most capacity to shape us. In marriage, that sharpening isn't accidental. It's intentional. It's part of the covenant. So the next time that friction shows up in your marriage and you want to run from it, ask yourself this first: what might God be trying to sharpen in me right now? Okay, let's zoom in on a few specific passages that reveal what our marriages are truly meant to look like. We touched on Hosea 2 a little bit earlier. This is God speaking to Israel, a people who, again, had repeatedly turned away from him. And his response wasn't rejection. It's a renewed betrothal, forever. We live in a world of short-term commitments and conditional love. But God models something radically different. He pursues, he restores, and he recommits. So when your marriage hits a breaking point, this is the love that you get to draw from. A love that says, I'm not done with you. I am choosing you again and again and again. Okay, let's turn over to Revelation chapter 19, verses 7 through 9. And here's what it says: Let us rejoice and be glad and give the glory to him. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. This right here, this is a culmination of all of human history, and it's described as a wedding. The bride has made herself ready. She isn't passive. She's prepared herself through faithful living, through righteous acts, and devotion to her groom. And here's the takeaway: how you love now is preparation. How you build your marriage now, how you honor your covenant now, how you grow in faith now, it's all a part of becoming ready. Every season of your marriage is preparation for something eternal. Okay, and lastly, let's turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2, where it says, For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. For I betrothed you to one husband, so that to Christ I might present you as a pure virgin. Here, Paul is writing to the church, and he uses the language of a father walking his daughter down the aisle. His concern is that she would be wholly devoted, undistracted, and faithful to the one she belongs to. In a world that constantly competes for our attention, is constantly competing for our affection, and is constantly competing for our loyalty, this verse is a call to singular devotion. In marriage, that looks like protecting your commitment. It looks like guarding your heart and guarding your home. Staying faithful not just physically, but also spiritually and emotionally. Your marriage, my friend, is worth fighting for because it reflects a covenant that's worth everything. All right, and here's where we come full circle. Every couple that we studied this season was a thread in a much larger tapestry. And now, standing at the end of the series, we can finally see the full picture. Let's look back on just a few. We started with Adam and Eve, who showed us the original design. Two becoming one, a partnership rooted in God. And when sin broke that design, God's plan for restoration was already set in motion. We looked at Abraham and Sarah, who showed us faith in God's promises, even when the timeline made absolutely no sense. Just as Christ keeps every promise he has made to his bride, even when we can't see how. We looked at Boaz and Ruth, and their story showed us a kinsman redeemer, a man who went out of his way to redeem what was lost. That's the picture of Jesus. Jesus, who left heaven to redeem us from everything that separated us from God. We also talked about Hosea and Gomer, and their story showed us a love that pursues even when it has every reason to walk away. a direct reflection of how Christ loves the church, relentlessly and without condition. And then most recently, we looked at Joseph and Mary, and their story showed us what it looks like to say yes to God's plan, even when it costs you everything. You see, every story, every marriage, every moment of faithfulness, of sacrifice, redemption, and covenant love, it was always pointing right here to Jesus, to the cross, to the moment when the bridegroom gave everything for his bride. We said it earlier, marriage is not just a social institution. It's a living sermon. Every time a husband lays down his preferences for his wife, it preaches the cross. Every time a wife honors her husband with grace and with respect, it reflects the church's devotion to Christ. Every time a couple chooses the covenant over comfort, they are telling the world something true about the nature of God's love. And again, this is the blueprint, and it's been in front of us the whole time. So you might be asking now, how do we put this into practice today? Well, let's look and see how that would apply. For married couples, love sacrificially, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. Jesus' love for the church wasn't contingent on her behavior. He loved her on her worst days, and he still does. In your marriage, the call is the same. What would it look like to love your spouse today the way that Christ loves you? Not because they've earned it, but because the covenant you made asks it of you. You're called to honor the covenant, not just the feelings. And feelings are valid, but they're not the foundation of a covenant. When the feelings fade, and let's be honest, in every marriage, they do at some point, the covenant is what holds. Identify one practical way this week to recommit to your marriage as a covenant. It could be a conversation. It could be praying together. Just a deliberate act of love that costs you something. And then lastly, let your marriage be a place of sanctification, not just satisfaction. Christ's goal for his bride isn't her comfort, it's her holiness. And the same is true in marriage. If your spouse is pointing out an area of growth, or if friction is revealing something in you that maybe still needs a little bit of work, that's not failure, that's refinement. Ask God to help you receive correction from your spouse the way that you receive it from him, with humility, not defensiveness. Okay, single Pringles, I'm not leaving you out of this one. There's a few things that you can apply today too. First, understand the standard before you set the bar. If you don't understand what love is designed to look like, you're going to settle for far less than what you were created for. Study it, know it. Second, prepare yourself to be a faithful partner by first being a faithful follower. The church prepares herself for her groom through righteous living and devotion. The preparation for a godly marriage, it starts right now. It starts in how you handle your singleness, in how you handle your purity, and how you handle your relationship with God. The faithfulness that you build today is the foundation that your future is going to be built on. And then lastly, your relationship with Christ is the template for every other relationship. The love that you've been called to give in marriage, it flows from the love that you receive from Jesus. If that relationship is healthy and it's growing and it's firmly rooted, you're going to love from fullness. But if that relationship is neglected or it's shallow or it's just transactional, every other relationship is going to feel the strain. So start there. Always start there. All right, friends, we started this series with a question. And the question was, what does God's design for marriage really look like? And episode by episode and couple by couple, we've been building the answer. Today, we have the full picture. Marriage was always a picture of Jesus and the church. A love that's sacrificial, a love that's sanctifying, a love that doesn't quit, it doesn't waver, It doesn't love conditionally. It's a love that pursues, even when it's been rejected. It's a love that restores, even when it has every reason to walk away. And here's the most important thing that I want you to leave with today. You, my friend, you are the bride. You are already fully loved. You are already fully chosen. You, my friend, are fully pursued by the one who gave everything for you. That's the truth. And that's the truth that should anchor your heart. It should anchor your marriage. And it should anchor your life. So whatever season your marriage is in right now, whether it's thriving, maybe it's struggling, maybe you're rebuilding, or maybe it's just beginning, you have a blueprint. The standard, it's been set, and the grace to live up to it comes from the same one who sets it. And the same is true even in your singleness. If today's episode blessed you, I would love for you to follow Her Strength in Him on Facebook at Her Strength in Him, or you can follow on Instagram at Her Strength Podcast. Like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the things. Every share puts this message in front of someone who may need it most. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here for every episode of Marriage Through Biblical Lenses. It's been a great honor to walk through this with you. And the series, it's never over. It lives on in how you love, in how you commit, and how you reflect His love in your marriage every single day. Now, let's go out and be a reflection of His strength in us. Until next time, friends.